I don't know what it is. I know it went up $675 million this year. They gave them more money. This added to their budget. That's just a small fraction of what their budget is. Their budget is $14 billion. That's what it is next year. That's what they're accounting. Last year it was $14 billion. It was 12.8. Well, let's look. I have it here. So let's see if I can pull it up. Here's the budget. Let's go to that. These are the numbers from the IRS. One thing about the IRS is they have numbers and stats on everything. And if you want a number, they have it broken down. So here is the number, $12.3 billion. These numbers are in thousands. So 12 million is 12 billion. $316,275. But here in the footnotes, they tell you that they got an extra 438 million and another 765 million. So close to $14 billion. Next year, the budget is over $14 billion. It raised, again, with the $675 million that they just appropriated for them. And again, so people start thinking, well, does that really mean that the IRS is underfunded? $14 billion is not enough money? That's a good question. There's a couple good stories. So and again, these stories are really about, you can see how they're planted now, these stories about how the IRS needs more, how they're understaffed, underfunded. And because there's a big push now to give them more money. And so, and they're hiring 10,000 more people. The before the 10,000 was 76,000 is the staff at the IRS, 76,000. So they want to do another 10,000. Well, that's more than a 10% jump. They actually want to hire another 80,000, more than doubling the size of the IRS. That's what's in the Build Back Better plan, and that's what the government is pushing for, or Joe Biden's government, I should say. So here's a story: Americans could do taxes for free in just minutes, like other countries, but the IRS has been starved of resources, the Treasury says. So that's our Treasury. Americans could do their taxes in minutes if the IRS had more funding. So they would do them for you. They would never cost more than if we had the government do it for us. The official cited how Estonians can file returns in 5 minutes. Estonians. The Treasury is pleading with Congress for more IRS funding to help it modernize. They've been trying to modernize since 1990. And they've been getting money every year of that $14 billion to modernize for technology. Sign up for a week. Okay, the Treasury is pleading with Congress for more IRS. Okay, so tax bills are due today, but the Treasury Department says the IRS needs more than your return to run at full capacity. In a blog post, the Treasury's Counselor for Tax Policy and Implementation once again laid out some of the challenges facing the underfunded agency. It's just a matter of it's underfunded. She points out that the example of other countries to look at what an adequately funded tax administrator would mean for Americans. For instance, she writes, in many developed countries, tax filing is simple and costless. They just take it all. Very simple. And give you back pennies. Kind of like what we do. But most countries have much higher tax rates than us. And then they tell you, well, we get everything for free. No, you don't. You pay for everything. You pay. There's nothing more costs more than when the government gives it to you for free. She cites the Atlantic's reporting that the average Estonian spends just 5 minutes doing taxes. That's even easier in Sweden, where many taxpayers just have to reply yes to a tax message to confirm their taxes, because the government knows everything about them and tracks them and controls every aspect of financial life. And they tell them, here's how much you made, this is what we're taking, okay? What are you going to say, no? On the other hand, the IRS is still opening mountains of papered returns by hand and running out of critical everyday items like carts and staples. They can't buy staples. They got $14 billion and they can't buy staples. Today's deadline is an inflection point in what has been the agency's most challenging filing season in recent years. This is the byproduct of chronic underfunding that has starved the IRS of tools it needs to serve the American people, coupled with historic pandemic that introduced new responsibilities alongside mammoth challenges. That is true. There was new responsibilities for months, but they were also appropriated more than $1 billion for those extra services. For months, the Treasury Department and the IRS's own commissioner have been sounding the alarm bell on how understaffed and underfunded the agency is. According to the Tax Policy Center, the IRS's budget, now I want you to remember these numbers, has shrunk by 20% in the last decade in real terms, much of it due to the Republican-led budget cuts. Because they're saying, well, the Republicans came down on the IRS after the IRS targeted American conservatives and then spent a lot of money frivolously on these conventions. And we talked a lot about that. And so, yes, some of the money some of their budget was cut because they thought, well, if you can waste money on these items, well, then maybe you don't need that money. At the same time, demand as measured by returns, to keep that in mind now, they're saying because returns have gone up 20%, so then that should equate to more money, has ramped up by 19%, according to the national taxpayer Erin Collins. Staffing is also low. She writes that the agency workforce is at 1970s levels. So let's think about that now. Their work staff is low. Why could that be? Why would that be? Why isn't it? If it's true that their staffing is low, what would be a reason for that? That's led to the historic backlog of tax returns. The IRS was still sitting on 6.2 million unprocessed individual returns at the end of 2021. The IRS has been making a dent in that slowly but surely. On April 7th, the IRS commissioner testified at the congressional hearing that the agency now had 2.7 million paper returns filed in calendar year 2021 sitting in inventory. Those delays have left millions of Americans waiting on their tax refunds for months. Some taxpayers told Insider that missing checks have meant they're having trouble affording groceries, childcare, and even their homes. Democrats sought to ramp up the IRS funding as part of the defunct Build Back Better legislation, as I mentioned. They set aside $80 billion meant to help the IRS hire additional auditors and employees capable of sorting through the hefty backlog of paper returns. $80 billion to sort through the backlog? Really? But the House-approved bill stalled out in the Senate due to the resistance from at least one centrist when Democrats needed an unanimity to pass it. 80. They don't mention that 50 Republicans voted against it. That just one guy. It just was one guy away. It's true, it was one vote away, but but still 50 Republicans voted against it. The IRS remains a pertinent target for conservatives wary of tax increases. Senator Rick Scott of Florida released a Republican platform last month that urged slashing the agency's budget by half. It prompted the commissioner to tell House lawmakers last month that you might be better off and save more money by just shutting it down completely if that was implemented. An IRS worker in Kansas City is trying to make sure you get your tax refund. If he can find Staples, we're real people just like you, with a $14 billion budget. The IRS misses billions in uncollected tax each year. Here's why. And I just want to get to this. The IRS is it just stated as a fact. The IRS is woefully understaffed and will miss about $600 billion in uncollected taxes this year as it grapples with technology built before humans landed on the moon. Like we haven't put billions into the technology since we landed on the moon. The understaffing has also led to frustrations for some Americans who called the IRS for help last year, with only 11% getting another human to answer the phone. He acknowledged those frustrations in an interview with All Things Considered and said the Bureau needed more support from Congress to enforce existing tax law and to make existing experience better for everyone. It's important to remember that the IRS is trying to serve every American. At And last year, the IRS received 230 million phone calls and had only 15,000 people to answer those calls, which meant that each person had to answer 16,000 calls. And while the American people feel that every day, what Congress has actually done is starve the IRS of resources it needs to enforce taxes against the wealthiest Americans. They always say that we need to go after the wealthiest Americans. That's why we need more money. No, you don't. Who are at least who are the least likely to pay their taxes. That's just not true. The wealthy Americans pay the most in taxes. They're more likely to pay their taxes. That's just not true. He also spoke about how taxes don't affect all Americans the same, why wealthier people can often avoid taxes, and how additional funding for Congress would help the Bureau's operation. I don't want to go through this. I just wanted to point out that it's come to just the fact that we're underfunded. So I wanted to point this out now. Maybe I should talk about something else. But before I show this, I should probably show this. Here is the number. Let me blow this up a little bit so we can look at it better. So there it is. Here is the number of tax returns filed electronically. This year, 2021, 96.7% of all tax returns are filed electronically. Last year it was 90%. And a lot of that was because of the mistakes that the IRS made, and the changes retroactive in Congress that made many of the electronic returns have to be converted into paper returns, and that's why it's only at 90% last year. 90% the year before, 88%, and it goes to 82 2011. So go down to 2000. In 2001, it was 30%. Right? And then he said, well, if it's 30% in 2001 and now it's 96%, how much savings does the IRS get for this? Well, here is the IRS submission processing pipeline video. And I don't want to play all of it, but I want to play some of it because it details how labor intensive it is to process paper returns. So let me start this and see if we can.
The Internal Revenue Service is one of the world's most efficient tax agencies, collecting trillions of dollars each year at a cost of less than 50 cents for every $100 collected. A significant part of that efficiency comes from the way we process tax returns, a process we call the pipeline. The primary purpose of the pipeline is to transfer taxpayer information from paper to the computer.
So they would
Let's take a streamlined look at how work flows through the pipeline. Incoming mail is automatically sorted and opened by a machine that reads the barcoded envelopes that identify the types of returns inside. The machine separates returns with payments from those without payments by detecting magnetic ink on enclosed checks. Returns are extracted from their envelopes and further sorted by type by employees using unique workstations called sorting tables. Before continuing their trip through the pipeline, returns with payments are routed through a remittance processing system to ensure deposit of revenue within 24 hours. Returns are then batched into official units of work called blocks, containing from 50 to 400 documents. Individual blocks containing the same types of returns are combined, placed on carts, and logged into a computer system which tracks their movement through the pipeline. Tax examiners correct taxpayer errors, assign codes that will facilitate data entry, and, if necessary, correspond with the taxpayer to request additional forms or information.
So I wanted to play. I don't know how the sound is coming across because I can't see it, so I don't want to. If it's terrible, I don't want to continue doing that. But it's just a sampling of the process that we used to take for every return, and now they say, well, the returns are up 20%. But none of those are processed by hand any longer. You don't need the facilities. You don't need the labor. You don't need the machinery. You don't need the storage. You don't need any of that. All of that is done electronically. Again, they would take a return and they would convert that paper return and input that data 2 different employees would take that and input that data. And think about the time that took, and why they don't do that anymore. So if returns, there's 20% more returns than there were, but 96% of them are all done electronically now. Do we really need 20% more people? The answer is obviously no. You don't need that many people. It's all done electronically. People never touch the returns, never see the returns. It's just the way it's done now. And so I just wanted to point this out. And again, I don't know how the sound was working on that. So, and again, here it is. 96.7% of all returns were done electronically. Pretty impressive, and they have the technology to do that. So, again, pretty impressive. I think it's an amazing thing. So